Ayn Rand is a philosopher known mostly for her works of fiction like Atlas Shrugged, which is still used as a type of manifesto for libertarianism, even though she denounced the party when she was alive. Through her writing, Ayn Rand developed a new philosophical theory called objectivism, which is the concept of man as a heroic being, with his own happiness as the moral purpose of his life, with productive achievement as his noblest activity, and reason as his only absolute. Objectivism is the concept that people forge their own destinies from the abilities they are born with. Essentially, some people are just naturally more gifted and talented, making them more important. Therefore, less gifted people need to get out of their way. Several scholars, philosophers, etc. over the years have poked holes in this philosophy, denouncing it as a cruel way to define the human condition. The idea that some people are simply born with more privilege than others, and we should collectively accept that as an immutable reality, is an awful thing to establish as normative. It is difficult to quantify how many talented people living in the United States may never be able to fully explore their potential because of their low income and the daily struggle to provide for themselves and their families. Despite this, many conservative and libertarian-leaning political pundits worship at the feet of Ayn Rand's philosophy. Ironically, Ayn Rand was a staunch atheist and openly denounced the Libertarian Party, saying she believed capitalism and believed libertarians were the enemy of capitalism. It is not uncommon for artists to reference Ayn Rand's philosophies in their own works. Director Zack Snyder has been accused of having Randian messages in his films like Man of Steel and Batman v Superman. More explicitly, he is scheduled to direct the film adaptation of one of Rand's most prestigious novels, The Fountainhead. Zack Snyder makes no secret of his admiration for the writer. However, not all writers and creators are as quick to associate their work with Randian influences. For example, tour director Brad Bird has denounced any ties with Ayn Rand's philosophy, even years after the accusations for having Randian themes in his filmography. Brad Bird is an animator and director who is most known for his work at Pixar Studios. Bird's filmography examines ideas about individualism which has, whether deserved or not, pegged him as a Randian in Hollywood for years. Brad Bird denies this. Responding to such allegations on DinnerGeek.com, Bird replies, "Me being a Ayn Rand guy is a lazy piece of criticism." Today we will review Brad Bird's filmography and piece together any Randian themes they might contain to see how these ideas correlate with one another and what Brad Bird could be trying to say through his films about individualism that is not rooted in Ayn Rand's philosophies. We will discuss how Brad Bird's films are against Ayn Rand and her philosophies. We will discuss the themes in Brad Bird's filmography, which are about the creative process itself, and we will talk about Brad Bird's true philosophy, which is about being able to excel no matter who you are or where you come from. Brad Bird's first film was The Iron Giant, a movie he made for Warner Bros. Animation department. It was initially a financial bomb, but is now considered a cult classic favorite. It is the story of a superpowered giant robot who has been built by an alien race to be a missile, a sentient weapon of mass destruction. If any of Brad Bird's characters could be considered exceptional from an Ayn Rand definition, it is the Iron Giant. The Iron Giant is a living, talking gun who develops feelings and empathy for the people around him. At the end of the Iron Giant is able to save the entire town from a nuclear holocaust when a war general in the town makes a stupid mistake to fire a missile on top of the town to stop the giant. This is the first example in the counter-argument that Brad Bird has an Ayn philosophy. Rand's philosophy has little to no room for empathy or compassion. It establishes the elite as deservedly sitting on top of the social hierarchy heap. In a Randian approach to the Iron Giant would understand the missile was sent to kill him, so he would just leave the town of innocents to die as he flew away and found somewhere else to live. He is exceptional after all. Why should he, of all people, be concerned with saving the lower class and the non-exceptional? The Iron Giant's sacrifice at the end of the film can be interpreted as Christ-like in both nature and practice. Just as Jesus died on the cross for the sinful men and women who, while not worthy, were deemed valuable and worthwhile, the Iron Giant sacrificed himself even though the town was frightened of him and desired his destruction. He saved the town and sacrificed himself so the people in the town could live. This seems to be in direct opposition of Randian philosophies. In fact, a Slate.com article titled, "No, Brad Bird Isn't a Disciple of Ayn Rand," discusses how, at the time, the Iron Giant's release, critics were saying that Brad Bird was a leftist and a Soviet apologist. A far cry from Randian principles. The film that Brad Bird made 5 years later would become the one that most people point to as being overtly Randian. The Pixar classic The Incredibles is about a family of superheroes who are forced to live the normal suburban life and not show off their powers because of a growing fear society has developed for superpowered beings. even those who use their exceptional abilities to help others. A major theme in the film is the concept that excellence should not be oppressed. One plot point in the film involves the son of Mr. and Mrs. Incredible, the super speeder kid named Dash, who really wants to try out for sports, specifically track, because he knows he can outrun every kid on the track team. His mother explains how that wouldn't be fair because he has a clear advantage over the other kids, and besides, they are all trying to hide their superpowers, not show them off. A pivotal scene in The Incredibles occurs when Bob Parr, Mr. Incredible, asks why Dash can't go out for sports. Helen Parr, Mrs. Incredible, reminds Bob that he knows exactly why he can't. Bob replies, because he would be great. This exchange is a perfect example of why people think The Incredibles is about objectivism, because the film is obviously sympathizing with the son for not being able to show off his own individualistic abilities, his exceptionalism. So the movie is trying to show that Dash is ultimately superior in every way to his classmates, therefore they should all have to compete with them because of objectivism, and just accept their rightful place in the hierarchy of things. But this is certainly not the case Brad Bird was trying to make. The Incredibles ends with Dash making a compromise. He is finally able to run on track, but he is holding back his true potential, and even decides to take second place. This ties into the overall theme of The Incredibles, which is actually the exact opposite of individualism. The film actually works as a horror story following Ayn Rand's philosophy, and shows that the connections we make with each other, and not the power we hold over each other, are the most important things in life. At the start of the film, Bob Parr has a boss who would look like an exceptionalist in Ayn Rand's philosophy, a big-shot capitalist businessman who screws over others who are less fortunate than him. He is on the top of the hierarchy because of his own prestige and power. The film immediately lets us know it's men like this who are the villains of the story. In the film, Bob Parr is going through a midlife crisis. He listens to police scanners and likes to save the day behind his wife's back. She's concerned he will get hurt or expose their family. Parr gets a secret mission opportunity, one he accepts without telling his wife or kids. Bob dons on the supersuit again and becomes Mr. Incredible. He gets back in shape and believes he's living the glory days once more. This idea is peak objectivism. It's okay if he's lying to his family, and it's okay if he's going against the government orders. Although he might not admit it to himself at the time, Mr. Incredible isn't doing the mission because he's wanting to save the world and make it a better place. He is only doing it for his own selfish self-satisfaction. Later in the film, this attitude bites him in the butt whenever Mr. Incredible realizes that Syndrome, an ex-fan of his, has devised a plan to capture him, and that the mission was all a ploy. He even believes his family is killed at one point while attempting to rescue him. In that dark moment, we see Mr. Incredible at his most vulnerable. Although he has super strength, the loss of his family renders him the weakest he's ever been. Eventually, of course, he does reunite with his family, and there's a moment towards the end of the film where his family is about to join him in the fight against the giant robot destroying the city. Parr insists to his wife, "I have to do this," and we think we see objectivism from Mr. Incredible peek out once again. He must do this for himself. However, this time, his wife confronts him and reprimands him for thinking about his ego before what is best for the city. But the expression on Bob Parr's face shows his wife and the audience that we have misjudged his motivations this time. He says, "I can't lose you again. I'm not strong enough." In this moment of vulnerability, Bob shows that his objectivist worldview, his self-desire to be seen as exceptional, has been the driving force that has placed them all in danger in the first place. They fight the robot as a team and together save the day. In a subsequent scene, we also see Dash take second place in the track meet. While they no longer have to entirely hide their abilities, they now have a higher calling, to serve the good of the people as a whole, and not just to satisfy their own selfish desires. This is a deliberate dissection and rebuttal of Randian philosophy. If this were a Ayn Rand novel, the ending would have seen Dash winning the race because he's the best and he wants to show off, and this is why he's better than everyone else. The idea of only chasing after self-satisfaction. Brad Bird doesn't do this and instead gives us a more heartwarming ending, showing that the family is truly the most important thing. Brad Bird's next film is also my favorite film of all time, Ratatouille. This film doesn't deal with Randian themes as explicitly as The Incredibles, but it certainly does dabble in some Randian ideas. The central idea of the film, the overtly stated theme, is that anyone can cook, which at first seems like a complete rejection of Rand's philosophy that emphasizes the exceptionalism of talented and gifted individuals over the less fortunate. It's not until the end of the movie that Randian themes seem to creep in. Anton Ego, a famous critic reviewing Chef Cousteau's restaurant, realizes that Remy, a four-legged rodent, is the chef who cooked the ratatouille meal he was served, and nonetheless gives the restaurant a glowing review. In one of the most beautiful and profound monologues in film history, he says, "Not everyone can become a great artist, but a great artist can come from anywhere." Julian Sanchez, in his article Ratatouille, the Populist Randianism of Brad Bird, writes that Ratatouille is essentially an animated version of The Fountainhead, except that cooking replaces architecture. The article explains in more detail how Remy at the start of the film is trying to convince his family of rats that they should not be satisfied or settle with the garbage they have been collecting, but should aspire to do more and to be more. Remy ends up finding the opportunity to cook through a janitor named Linguini. Linguini hides Remy under his hat, and Remy pulls his hair, providing instructions to get ingredients together to craft some of the best dishes the restaurant has ever concocted. Linguini is regarded by some people as the conduit in the story that needs to stay out of the way for the artist to succeed. Linguini can't cook, but the rat can, referencing the quote, again, "Not everyone can become a great artist, but a great artist can come from anywhere." It is easy to see why people might consider this a Randian message. But here's a bit more to this than meets the eye. I think Ratatouille actually plugs into Plato's definition of morality. According to Plato's Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, like most other ancient philosophers, Plato maintains a virtue-based concept of ethics. That is to say, happiness or well-being, of the highest aim of moral thought and conduct, and the virtues are the requisite skills and dispositions needed to attain it. Therefore, the character Remy is trying to find his own self-satisfaction, and it's through his virtue, skills, and dispositions that he finds success. Linguini, as a character, never has the desire to be a great chef. It feels bestowed upon him because he is following in the footsteps of his father, who we discover in the film is Chef Cousteau, the founder of the restaurant he works at. The end of the film reveals that Linguini doesn't have to live in the lie that he is the masterful chef making great dish after great dish. The highest aim in Plato's definition of morality is moral thought and conduct. Linguini is more at peace with himself and content being a waiter and makes that distinct decision for himself. He isn't some peasant Remy walks all over to achieve his own success, and Remy isn't making food to be a figure that obtains power. Actually, the end of the film sees Chef Cousteau's restaurant, the big corporation, go out of business due to health inspections because, rats. It is then that Remy establishes his own restaurant for people to enjoy. He has the skills to obtain his dream and the moral thought and conduct to do it without hurting others. His success and happiness is because of the art he makes, not the power he obtains. The phrase, "not anyone can become a great artist, but a great artist can come from anywhere," shows that some people don't have the drive to find their own personal success, but anyone can do it. This is anti-Randian in conceit, since we have established that Ayn Rand's philosophy preaches that people are born in their own self-interest and some people will just genuinely be better and deserve more acclaim than others. Brad Bird begins making live-action films after Ratatouille, and the first film he directs is Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol. This is the film in his repertoire that has the least amount of Randian themes in it. The Globe and Mail stated, "Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol is the only Brad Bird film to avoid such blatant Randian sermonizing, likely because it's the sole movie that he also didn't write." Though, come to think of it, isn't Tom Cruise's super spy Ethan Hunt just an ass-kicking John Galt? But he obviously isn't. While both John Galt and Ethan Hunt are super spies in their own ways, Ethan Hunt's missions are to help other people. John Galt's only objective is to tell people to live only for themselves and understand that you're the individual and you're the most important person and don't care about the people around you. The Brad Bird film that possibly tackles Randian themes in the most obvious way is his next live-action film, Tomorrowland. David Sims, writer for The Atlantic, describes the controversy of Tomorrowland and its connection to Ayn Rand perfectly. In Tomorrowland, the world's most innovative thinkers, artists, and scientists discover another dimension where they can build a utopia free of society's ills. Eventually convinced that humanity's downfall was imminent, they retreat there permanently, turning it into Gall's Gulch, a secluded community of anti-government capitalists in Atlas Shrugged. Bird has repeatedly denied that there's any political dimension to his work, and there's no reason for us not to believe him. But it's also clear that his favorite subject is the raging passion of a creative genius being constrained. Tomorrowland stars George Clooney, who plays a genius-level scientist named Frank Walker. Walker's invited to live with all of the greatest mind sciences ever known, yet Walker wants to share his discoveries he makes with all of humanity. Walker, because of his empathy for the everyday individual, is kicked out from the elitist group of scientists and chooses to live a normal, rural life. He is a frustrated genius, thinking his ideas have sadly been undermined because of where he lives and his empathy for other people. Frank Walker has a doomsday device he created that predicts the Earth will be destroyed in 60 days. One reason the other scientists don't want to associate with mankind is because they believe it is a doomed race that will kill itself off because of its incompetence. Hugh Laurie, who plays the main antagonist of the film, recites a monologue where he sums up his problems with the human condition in a very blunt fashion. He essentially says humans are a waste because they see a dystopian future, and instead of doing anything and everything they can to prevent it, they accept it as true and commercialize it in movies and video games. He states, "How do we live in a world where people are dying of obesity and starvation?" The speech is something of pretty damning the first time you watch it, because Laurie is not entirely in the wrong in what he's saying. It is the idea of abandoning Earth and humanity that is the wrong decision. Actually, it's no solution at all. Laurie's rant is very Randian in its outlook. Allow the people who are smart enough to understand the issues plaguing the world to live freely and only think for themselves as they watch the rest of humanity crumble. For some of us, the solution, while immoral and unempathetic, seems somewhat plausible, yet Tomorrowland goes for the much more optimistic ending. Instead of saying the world is going to end in 60 days, so let's sit around and worry until the day comes, they say, what can we do in these 60 days to make the world a better place? In the movie, this mindset is what saves the planet as a whole and creates a better utopia for everyone, when the great thinkers and the everyday working class come together and agree to make the world a better place. In some ways, this is very wishful thinking. We are currently in such a philosophically divided world that this mindset would seem almost impossible to accomplish. Yet the film lives in a hopeful and optimistic view of the future. It lives in the future that Walt Disney envisioned in the Tomorrowland section of Disneyland. A place where people could revel in the technology of the future and still care about one another. While Tomorrowland can be sympathetic to Randian ideas, it certainly isn't an endorsement of them. If this was a Randian novel, the scientists would have abandoned Earth and let it crumble and let the most powerful in the capitalistic system be left standing. Frank Walker decides to give humanity a chance and see if they could all come together to create a better future. He gives up his own Randian individualistic sensibilities of thinking he is a misunderstood genius and uses his gift for the betterment of the world in general. This is in complete contrast of what Ayn Rand explores in her Atlas Shrugged series. If anything, this movie could be considered an interesting critique of her philosophies rather than an endorsement. Next off, we'll talk about The Incredibles 2. The Incredibles 2 is Brad Bird's latest film and is of course the sequel to the first Incredibles movie. The first Incredibles film was the film that earned Brad Bird his Ayn Rand reputation in the first place, and Incredibles 2 is the commentary on this philosophy and the dangers of it. Many people see this film as Brad Bird's loud rebuttal of being labeled a Randian. The villain of the film is called the Screenslaver, who uses the devices of our current generation to brainwash society. The subtlety in Incredibles 2 is pretty much non-existent. A lot of the monologues that the Screenslaver recites seem to be obvious arguments against Ayn Rand's philosophies. The Screen Rant article, Incredibles 2 Rejects Popular Theory about the first film, writes, Brad Bird intentionally made Incredibles 2 into a combination of Rand's principles, considered the Screenslaver, the primary villain of The Incredibles 2. Early on, the character delivers an elitist monologue describing ordinary citizens in unflattering terms, saying they are content to spend their lives staring at a series of screens rather than truly living. Such contempt for the ordinary people frequently arises in objectivist writings, which alternatively admonish the common clay as they promote their chosen elite. The Screenslaver also condemns the actions of superheroes, saying they lull people into compliancy rather than inspiring them to greater things. The Screenslaver ends up being Eleven Denever? I think I pronounced that right. A person Elastigirl has become friends with over the course of the film. Her idea is that it is very naive to believe superheroes are in it to save and protect people. She believes in her machines to help people live better lives and brainwashes all the superheroes with her own technology. Essentially, she is trying to save her business from her brother, her business partner, who is trying to prove to the world that superheroes are good people who are trying to protect the weak. Eleven's view of humanity is a lot more bitter and thinks the worst of superheroes and believes they should be stopped. She is a businesswoman who is using her talents and assertive powers to control people she believes are below her, ultimately to protect her business ventures. This is the perfect definition of a protagonist in an Ayn Rand novel, but in the film she is the villain of the piece. Brad Bird doesn't even sympathize with her ideas, but shows that she is a twisted and immoral person. One can only wonder if the film's plot was made as a device to prove he isn't a fan of Ayn Rand and her ideas. Overall, there are certainly filmmakers who follow Ayn Rand and her philosophies, but Brad Bird just isn't one of them. Brad Bird's movies are about excelling despite where you come from. His films examine the drive it takes to be a creative or an innovator. The quote, Not anyone can become a great artist, but a great artist can come from anywhere, sums up Brad Bird's themes in a nutshell. He even shows in Tomorrowland that even the most ordinary and mundane citizens can make a difference if they stop living in the fear and excel despite the fear of the future. He even shows in Tomorrowland that even the most ordinary and mundane citizens can make a difference if they stop living in fear and excel despite their fear of the future. Brad Bird is an imaginative creator who wants to spark creativity in his viewers. He certainly isn't saying that there should only be an elite, powerful few and everyone else needs to stay out of their way. He is saying that anyone can excel and be powerful if you have the drive and willpower to create. The idea that people aren't inherently born more powerful, but you excel by your drive to create no matter who you are or where you come from, is the opposite of Ayn Rand and her principles in her novels, which is the fact that some people are just born with more privilege and we must accept the status quo.